Teresa Scorset, this is Robin Hensel, and we have a guest joining us today, and Larry Fisk. We're going to be talking about the Camp Ripley Shadow drones and any number of other topics as they come up for us. So we'll start with Robin. She's got the lead story here.
Well, I'm going to begin with something that Colleen Rowley, a friend of mine, and we've recently written a guest editorial that will be published somewhere about the illegality of drone use for assassinations throughout the world. She wrote this on her Facebook page. She says, human rights and democracy promotion abroad, but not here in the United States, have become the false rationale for United States military interventions, regime changes, coups, etc. Also, the United States can maintain its full spectrum dominance of the entire world. National Endowment for Democracy and even the Peace Institute and other US-based peace groups are now filled with neocon war hawks. And now I'm going to share something with you that I wasn't aware of until recently when I started digging to find a peace proclamation. Mother's Day was started on behalf of peace and peace activism and civil action for women instead of what we think of it as today. Honor Mother with rallies in the streets. The holiday began in activism. It needs rescuing from commercialism and platitudes. Every year people snipe at the shallow commercialism of Mother's Day, but to ignore your mother on this holy holiday is unthinkable. And if you are a mother, you'll be devastated if your ingrates fail to honor you at least one day of the year.
Mother's Day wasn't always like this. The women who conceived Mother's Day would be bewildered by the ubiquitous ads that hound us to find that perfect gift for Mom. They would expect women to be marching in the streets, not eating with their families in restaurants. This is because Mother's Day began as a holiday that commemorated women's public activism, not as a celebration of a mother's devotion to her family. The story begins in 1858 when a community activist named Anna Reeves Jarvis organized Mother's Works Days in West Virginia. Her immediate goal was to improve sanitation in Appalachian communities. During the Civil War, Jarvis pried women from their families to care for the wounded on both sides. Afterward, she convened meetings to persuade men to lay aside their hostilities. In 1872, Julia Ward Howe, author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, proposed an annual Mother's Day for peace. Committed to abolishing war, Howe wrote, "Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure their sons." For the next 30 years, Americans celebrated Mother's Day for Peace on June 2nd. Many middle-class women in the 19th century believed that they bore a special responsibility as actual or potential mothers to care for the casualties of society and to turn America into a more civilized nation. They played a leading role in the abolitionist movement to end slavery. In the following decades, they launched successful campaigns against lynching and consumer fraud and battled for improved working conditions for women and protection for children, public health services and social welfare assistance to the poor. To the activists, the connection between motherhood and the fight for social and economic justice seemed self-evident. In 1913, Congress declared the second Sunday in May to be Mother's Day. By then, the growing consumer culture had successfully redefined women as consumers for their families. Politicians and businessmen eagerly embraced the idea of celebrating the private sacrifices made by individual mothers. As the Florist Review, the industry's trade journal, bluntly put it, this was a holiday that could be exploited. The new advertising industry quickly taught Americans how to honor their mothers by buying flowers. Outraged by florists who were selling carnations for the exorbitant price of $1 apiece, Anna Jarvis's daughter undertook a campaign against those who would undermine Mother's Day with their greed, but she fought a losing battle. Within a few years, the Florist Review triumphantly announced that it was Miss Jarvis who was completely squelched. Since then, Mother's Day has ballooned into a billion-dollar industry. Americans may revere the idea of motherhood and love their own mothers, but not all mothers. Poor, unemployed mothers may enjoy flowers, but they also need childcare, job training, health care, and a higher minimum wage and paid parental leave. Working mothers may enjoy breakfast in bed, but they also need the kind of government assistance provided by every other industrialized society. With a little imagination, we could restore Mother's Day as a holiday that celebrates women's political engagement in society. During the 1980s, some peace groups gathered at nuclear test sites on Mother's Day to protest the arms race. Today, our greatest threat is not from missiles, but from our indifference toward human welfare and the health of our planet. Imagine, if you can, an annual Million Mother March in the nation's capital. Imagine a Mother's Day filled with voices demanding social and economic justice and a sustainable future, rather than speeches studded with syrupy platitudes. Some will think it insulting to alter our current way of celebrating Mother's Day, but public activism does not preclude private expressions of love and gratitude, nor does it prevent people from expressing their appreciation all year round. 19th century women dared to dream of a day that honored women's civil activism. We can do no less. We should honor their vision with civic activism.
And just kind of a humorous note here, I was a lifetime florist. Had I known any of this, you can rest assured, even though my businesses weren't based on fresh flowers, while I was employed by a number of different fresh florist shops, I would have certainly been promoting that had I known that. Two of the most outstanding women that we want to call highlight here, one of them being grandmother. I don't know if Kathy Kelly has any children, but certainly there are two activists that I'd like to highlight today that have done some outstanding things, and I have a feeling, I know that Kathy Kelly has been invested and has done some activism at nuclear power plants. She may have been one of those early women in the 80s that went to the nuclear test sites and protested there. Kathy Kelly, of course, was part of a drone protest, actually, at the Whitman Air Force Base not long ago. And I'll just read you a little bit about what's happened to her. She's just now wrapping up serving 3 months in a federal prison. On April 21st, Kathy Kelly will be leaving federal prison in Kentucky, having served 3 months for her counter-drone war protest at Whitman Air Force Base Drone Control Center in Knob Noster, Missouri. On April 27th and 28th, she will be participating in the counter-drone protest at Beale Air Force Base near Sacramento, California. The title of this article is "Jail Time Has Taught These Two Women Nothing." On April 1st, Bonnie Block was sentenced to 5 days in jail in Juneau County Jail in Wisconsin because of her counter-drone war protest at Volk Field, where they fly Shadow drones. On April 1st, 2015, a 6-person jury found me guilty, this is Bonnie Block saying this now, of trespassing at the Volk Field open house because I handed out leaflets with 4 questions about drone warfare in the parking lot of the Wisconsin National Guard Museum. National Guard personnel deemed that propaganda sight unseen. The result was my arrest, being charged with trespass, pretrial motions to greatly limit the evidence I could present to the jury, and ultimately the trial. The fine was $232, but I felt I couldn't in good conscience pay it. So Judge Paul Curran sentenced me to serve 5 days in the county jail. Now it's interesting to note she's a former attorney practicing family law, so she represented herself. And Larry, I'll let you read some more about her story.
This is entitled "Wisconsin Grandmother Jailed for Opposing Drone Murders." Bonnie Block, a Madison grandmother and longtime peace activist, was found guilty of trespassing in a jury trial in Juneau County Courthouse on Wednesday, April 1st, 2015, and sent to jail. Block was compelled to either pay $232 or spend 5 days in the Juneau County Jail. Faced with that choice, Block said in court, "Your Honor, I asked for a jury trial in this matter so I could explain to the citizens of Juneau County my moral, constitutional, and legal reasons for opposing the drone training via handing out a leaflet at the Volk Field open house. I also wanted to point out the absurdity of being arrested for trespassing at an event to which the public had been invited. However, the court's pretrial orders based on the district attorney's 25-point motion precluded me from explaining this to the jury because the pretrial orders prohibited any mention to the jury of the very issues that I believe constituted defense for my nonviolent action. These prohibitions also made it impossible for me to testify on my own behalf because I couldn't honor the oath to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And to top it off, there was the unilateral refusal of Folk Field Commander Romuald to honor my third-party subpoena to testify so he could explain the military rules and rationale that he considers the justification for my arrest. It puts the military brass above the law, and I object. For these reasons, I can't in good conscience pay the fine. It would be giving consent to the outcome of a legal process I believe was unfair, and which sets dangerous precedents for those of us engaged in nonviolent civil resistance and seeking justice for victims of U.S. drone warfare. So I'll do the time instead of paying the fine. The trespassing charge was the result of a May 17, 2014 action in which Block and Father Jim Murphy took a bus tour of Volk Field, which was part of the base's open house, to which the public was invited. As they left the bus at the National Guard Museum, they handed out a leaflet with 4 questions about drones to the other passengers on the bus. As a result, they were arrested and ultimately charged with trespass. Block opted for a jury trial because she believed her constitutional right of free speech was violated, as was her conscientious objection to drone warfare. Block, who represented herself in front of the 6-person jury, was prevented from mounting a vigorous defense as a result of Judge Curran's pretrial ruling in favor of a motion which prevented Block from talking about international law, the U.S. Constitution, morals and ethics, and other topics important to the case. Block is part of the Wisconsin Coalition to Ground the Drones and End the Wars, which holds monthly vigils outside the gates of this Wisconsin Air National Guard base. Since 2009, Folk Field has been training operators of RQ-7 Shadow drones that are part of U.S. drone wars. But charges dropped in Syracuse. Judge Robert Jokel dismissed charges against 4 Hancock Air Force Base defendants in the interest of justice. Arguing against Assistant DA Peter Hacks were attorneys Jonathan Wallace representing Julian Oldfield and John Honeck, Kathy Manley representing Andrew Shorkey, and Kim Zimmer representing Mary Snyder. Their charges were trespass, 2 counts of disorderly conduct, and obstruction of government administration, a misdemeanor. The 4 perps were among 31 arrested in a nonviolent die-in at the front gate of Hancock's 174th Attack Wing, home of the Reaper drone, on April 28, 2013, following a weekend drone conference here in Syracuse. For half a decade, we have been charging Hancock with war crimes and terrorism against the people of Afghanistan and elsewhere.
And of course, there was a recent another event at Creech Air Force Base, and it was called Shut Down Creech. And a number of people were arrested there. Activists had created 100 tombstones with the names and ages of children murdered by U.S. drone strikes in Pakistan and Yemen, and they were displayed along the Drone Victim Memorial Highway, aka Route 95, that runs by Creech. And Colonel Ann Wright was there, and a priest, and a bunch of other notable vets for peace, and so that was another big action. And there's this type of opposition from good, decent, moral, law-abiding citizens, many of them seniors, all over our nation, because, and not only here, but in Germany and everywhere,
Yes.
because drone warfare is terrorism. Drone warfare is illegal, and it's also very immoral. And more highlight is being brought home because of that. I just want to show a picture of, that's a mailbox that I have out front of my house, because mailboxes are legal under the sign ordinance, so I can put whatever I want on my mailbox and decorate it however I like, and I can have however many mailboxes I like, so I'm going to take advantage of that and use my mailboxes to, this one says Camp Ripley drones, shadow drones are lethal killers, because they are. The other side of that mailbox says U.S. drone warfare is terrorism. I'm not the only one that feels that way.
Now, how would you define terrorism, just so that we're not throwing out a term that we haven't really thoroughly looked at?
Well, let me say it like Kelly Rowley says it.
Okay.
A poor man's war is terrorism. Rich man's war,
Rich man's
rich
terrorism.
man's terrorism is war.
So either way, we're waging an offensive on both levels. Both, we're just going to come in and cream you, and also we're going to scare the heck out of you so that for generations to come you won't mess with us.
I think Larry has an opinion on that.
Yes.
Traditionally, I thought that terrorism was, violence against civilians for a political end. After 9/11, it's changed to be anybody the United States doesn't like,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And to relate drone warfare to terrorism, it seems to me pretty clear that having drones hovering over villages where the people have no idea when and whom they're going to strike, and if they're in the wrong place in the wrong time, their children may be killed, which happens quite frequently. We know wedding parties have been attacked. We know that, the recent incident that's in the news now about the 2 hostages that were killed goes to show they don't know who they're killing.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes they're targeting specific individuals that they want to kill. Other times we know they're just targeting people whose patterns of behavior, their computer or whatever is saying are suspicious, and they decide to. Now, we know that in many instances there are other people around. You could be a passerby, you could be a neighbor, you could be a mother, you could be a cook, you could be whatever, and you may die from these attacks. So really, certain populations are constantly living in fear, and that would certainly, to me, enter into the, one of the interpretations of terrorism.
Absolutely. I've done some recent research on shadow drones, and of course, Camp Ripley flies not only the Shadow drone, but the Raven drone. That are the 2 drones that we know of that they're flying. And of course, in September of 2015, if the FAA opens up the national airspace to drones, we're going to be seeing a lot bigger drones coming in here, because Colonel St. Sauver has said at a council meeting a year or 2 ago that once those skies are opened up, that through the DEED program, that Camp Ripley people are going to be doing some of the maintenance on some of the larger drones. I don't know if they intend to truck them in here or if they would just fly them in. My guess is they would just be flying them in, so we may be seeing the Global Hawks and the Reapers and the Predators over our skies locally here before too long. This is just factual information that I've gotten from the DoD website, except the beginning part here.
DoD's Department of Defense.
Department of Defense. When Colonel St. Sauver, the commander at Camp Ripley, stated in September 2012 that unmanned aircraft systems may be used to increase efficiency, save money, enhance safety, and even save lives, he wasn't telling the whole story. In 2010, the Army Aviation and Missile Command Program sought industry information on weapon systems ready for production and suitable for integration on the RQ-7B with POP 300D laser designator payload Shadow UAS. With missions in Afghanistan occurring beyond artillery support range, arming the Army Shadows is simply the next logical step. Small UAVs are part of the trend towards federated air power. They're more affordable to operate, which means they can provide far wider battlefield coverage for small unit engagements. The goal of the United States State Department was to arm the Shadows with guided bombs weighing 25 pounds, cleared for treaty compliance in 2011. Turns out, small UAVs pack a lethal punch by providing GPS target acquisition, detection, identification, and location of target in sufficient detail to permit the effective employment of lethal and non-lethal means in Iraq and Afghanistan. Shadow drones are an accomplice in the illegal drone assassination program, President Obama's disposition matrix kill list. Shadow drones are used in conjunction with the larger drones, like the Reaper and the Predators, to identify people, targets to be assassinated. The United Nations Special Rapporteur has called drone strikes extrajudicial killing. In 2004, the Shadow's wingspan was increased to 14 feet, allowing it to carry more fuel and fly for 6 hours. Eventually, Shadow engines were eventually replaced to improve reliability and add additional capability. An avionics systems upgrade allows the unit to become a relay station, allowing it to communicate in areas otherwise dead to radio traffic. In 2010, wing harnesses like Smart Rack and software updates were added for a payload, which includes a designator for guiding laser-guided bombs. In 2011, the Marine Corps received clearance to weaponize the Shadow drone, and in that same year, Raytheon successfully tested a new 5-pound warhead developed for the Shadow. In 2012, Raytheon completed the first end-to-end test of Pyros, a 13-pound warhead. The test validated the weapon's guidance modes, height of burst sensor, electronic safe and arm device, and multi-effects warhead. The Fury, Thales Textron beam riding lightweight module missile, was tested from an RQB, that's a Shadow drone, in 2014. In 2012, USMC sent 8 armed RQ-7B Shadows to Afghanistan as a common combat demonstration program. After 94 high-value targets escaped during a Marine unit's deployment, even though they were spotted by RQ-7Bs circling overhead. Potential weapon systems should be able to engage stationary and moving targets such as light vehicles and dismounted combatants in day and night conditions with low collateral damage. When launched from a Shadow UAS flying at speeds of 60 to 70 knots and between 5,000 and 12,000 feet above ground level. In the future, universal ground control stations will allow video feeds from Gray Eagle, Shadow, and Hunter UAS on a single system. Next generation one system remote video terminals with portable laptop computer-like displays able to show real-time feeds from a nearby UAS will allow the operator to control the sensor payload load of a nearby UAS. According to Brilliant Warrior, United States Armed Forces will become smaller, capability will be tightly integrated, and speed, precision, and ability to operate effectively in ambiguous circumstances will become the treasured operational values. When smart networks communicate, almost brain-like systems will emerge. Coalitions will be the norm. The armed forces of the future will be described as an organism of organisms. America is already reaping some natural consequence blowback by setting dangerous, frightening worldwide precedent. There was never a good war or a bad peace.
I think this would be a good time to talk about war in general and then put the drones in the context. We're living in an era of war.
Yes.
Perpetual war.
Mm-hmm.
And what have those wars done? How are they justified, and what have they accomplished? All they've accomplished is set the stage for more war and more conflict.
And bankrupted our nation almost.
And I heard Congressman Nolan speak recently. He was talking about Iraq. Eventually, by the time we pay for all the victims of PTSD and brain damage and such, that the total cost of Iraq will be $6 trillion. $6 trillion. And he described it, he said you could take $1 trillion and pay everyone's college loans, you could take $1 trillion and fund universal health care, et cetera, et cetera. These wars destroy people directly, and they destroy the quality of our lives indirectly. They mean people within our societies that should live and prosper will sicken and die and not be taken care of. They keep us from building the transportation and energy infrastructure that we need to combat climate change and have a possibility of our descendants surviving decently on this planet. So, these wars are costly in every way. they're immoral in every way. Every single one of them is totally unjustified. But from the things you're reading, we can tell the ruling class of the United States is determined to spend our money on high-tech projects to try to dominate and control the world, control the resources and the politics and the cash flow of the world. And it's all means a disaster for the peoples of the world, the peoples of the Middle East, specifically with drones, but really for all of us. It's a lose-lose-lose situation,
lose.
and we have to stop war. We
Right.
have no option. We either stop war or it makes human civilization non-viable on the earth. These weapons will only get more horrible and more destructive, and they never bring any type of stability.
Well, and Iraq wasn't a war to begin with. Iraq was an illegal invasion, and I believe you can't win an invasion. It's not possible. And I also believe that under international law, when any nation invades another nation, they are obligated by law to rebuild that nation, to rebuild any of the damage that that nation that's invading has done. So I don't know if Rick Nolan's $6 trillion figure includes that rebuilding of their infrastructure.
I don't think so, because I don't think any realistic person thinks the U.S. would ever have any intentions of actually rebuilding any of the countries it's destroyed. George W. Bush said we were going to rebuild Afghanistan, more beautiful than it was, or whatever. We've never paid our reparations to Vietnam. I don't think there's any prospect of anybody budgeting money to rebuild Iraq.
It's just rotten. I know I've said this on Facebook and I've said it on Twitter, and I'll very proudly say it here. I'm not proud of my nation, and I never ever thought I'd be saying that, but I'm ashamed of this nation in more than one way.
Well, I think we need to, distinguish between the people of the United States who never want these wars, but get misinformed and scared to the point where they think, oh, okay, I guess we have to do it. It's not our project. We don't want it. Mothers don't want to send their children off to war. And, I think we should face the consequences of Iraq and Afghanistan have been horrible, even in our own community. There are many damaged people. Many people who will always be damaged. The cost has been really high. For what? Because everything that we've done, and many of us who were active before this series of wars said, this will just, create terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, Al-Qaeda is thriving, ISIS is thriving. Every time you drone bomb somebody, somebody's going to hate you for doing it. It isn't like there's ever an end to it. The U.S. propensity for war is, perhaps the greatest problem that we have, because as long as this push towards war and the spending for war and the brutalization goes on, more conflict goes on, and we put off all the things we really need to be doing as human beings to develop decent lives for our people on the planet. It's a total disaster, and we've got to keep saying it. I mean, some people give up because we try to stop one war and then they just have the next, and the next, and the next. But we've got to, never give up. We've all got to talk about peace. We have to have peace. Our children have to have peace. We have no, and we win. We have to win the struggle against war. There's no other option. We have to win it.
So,
Very well said.
right, as part of my research, I printed just yesterday a 250-some page document, and you can look this up. It's an unclassified document. It's called 2015 CRTC Range Regulation, the Warrior's Choice, and its Camp Ripley document. And there's some real interesting information in this document regarding the shadow drones, the flying of the shadow drones, the use of white phosphorus.
And this is all in Morrison County. We're no longer talking about Afghanistan.
Right. So, on page 12 of this document, 2.4, coordinating use of the special use of airspace for UAS, that's a drone. They're talking about, there's information in here about what they're gonna do if there's a lost link. In other words, if the drone is off flying on its own and they've lost track of it, how are they gonna deal with that?
Bring another one after it.
The recovery of other SUAS and UAS is appropriate. Under item N, it says, warning, in the event of a UAS emergency or lost link, notify the MAAF operations tower immediately. The type of UAS that might be lost might be a Raven or a Shadow. And then tells some other procedural things here. Shadow aircraft may be mixed with manned aircraft only within the confines of a restricted area, R-4301, and shall have lateral and or vertical separation provided by ATC. Shadow UAS are the only authorized UAS to operate in Class D. Then it tells about some poisoning or issuing ammunition and explosives, and to do with rapid burning. I won't go into that, but I do want you to know what it says here about the UAS. There's laser missions taking place. I won't talk extensively about that because I haven't had time to research it, but evidently they're using lasers to destroy things out there. It sure sounds like it anyway. I'll give an update on that after I've researched this thoroughly. Under 11.3 unmanned aircraft systems considerations, I'm not positive, but I'm going to read this and let you make your own decision. It sure sounds to me like they've been firing ordnances, in other words bombs, off of the Shadow drones out there for some period of time. At least they're giving authorization to do it in 2015. Under 11.3 item C, Air Mission Commanders takes all measures necessary to ensure training operations are conducted within assigned SUA or other authorized operating area, and that unmanned aerial vehicles and all effects, for example, munitions/laser, are contained within assigned boundaries. Under 11.3.2, operator qualifications for platform payload operations, aviation, weapons, delivery terminal guidance. Under A, Army, then under item number 2, it says operators demonstrate platform payload and weapon system proficiency in accordance with TC1-600 and FM 3-04.140. And here's the meat of what I have found about UAVs and bombs. If a UAS loses uplink for a short period of time, the aircraft automatically execute return home procedures so that the uplink can be reacquired. For ordnance delivery, operate UAS in visual meteorological conditions and when the weather is forecast to remain VMC throughout the flight. Arm ordnance for delivery only when the aircraft is within SUA and in position from which, if released, the ordnance remain within the designated impact area if operating with weapons. The UAS operator notifies Range Control OIC when the UAS has completed the ordnance delivery and when departing the range. The mission commander maintains the responsibility for safe operation of payload and platform. Developmental experimental UAS systems. If the UAS has not yet been fielded, provide range control facility personnel current reliability information and a worst case depiction of potential range, direction, and SUA point of departure for developmental experimental UAS in the event that loss of contact procedures fail. UAS operations conducted outside restricted areas and warning areas. UAS operations conducted outside restricted areas and or warning areas comply with the provisions of FAO 7610.4 and MOA concerning the operation of DoD UAS in the NAS dated 24 September 07.
I'm sorry.
So, in other
That
words,
alphabet soup just completely.
to me, that sounds like they're firing, an ordinance is a bomb. And they wouldn't have this in this document if they weren't doing it out there. That's just my take on
Or
it.
have it within their possibility to do it in the future.
Correct, correct.
So this document is specific to Camp Ripley, or is
Yes.
this a general?
Yes, this
Can you
is
read the
the,
title to me again?
this is 2015 CRTC Range Regulation, the Warrior's Choice, Colonel St. Sauver, Garrison Commander, State of Minnesota, Department of the Army, Camp Ripley, Minnesota, October 2014, but it's 2015 Range
Right.
Regulations.
So whatever they may have done up to this point, obviously they have it in their regulations to be dealing with ordnance and laser weapons.
Yes, yes. And in some of the other documents that I've been researching, it looks to me like smaller drones are going to be used with the capability of lasers for destruction of human life as well as buildings, vehicles, some other target. And one thing to remember, those Raven drones that they're using out there are in a canister. And they're very lightweight. I think they're like a total of 5 pounds. And once the soldier takes them with them on the field, they can be set up. There's a little computer thing that goes with them, and they can be set on a target some distance away and used as a kamikaze unit, in other words, to kill people. So it's like a little tiny assassinator drone.
Mm-hmm.
And drone swarms are going to be a very much thing of the future. I was telling Teresa and Larry earlier that I'm researching a document, it's an Air Force document about the technology involving drone swarms because they're much cheaper and they can overwhelm the enemy. And with the depleting budgets, with the military budgets being slashed, they have to do something to keep up their capability to blow things up and kill everything that moves, which is their mission.
The budgets haven't been slashed that much. But the other thing is they want to be able to do warfare without having the blowback from big people, American soldiers hurt. So they want to do it on the cheap.
Right, right.
And they also want to do it without, the public getting disenchanted with their efforts because people are coming home damaged.
And there's a move toward robotic drone usage and robotic warfare. And there was a big conference held in Europe about that recently. There's a big uproar. A lot of people don't want that. Just to mention a couple of the things that are in this document, I'm going to research and come back with you. But
Before you go into those specifics, I think it's good to think about, obviously they're going to try to develop this weaponry to the max, but I mean, they're researching in all these, robotics and all other fields because there is no plan existing in the government of the United States to ever have a world at peace. They have no
Right.
plans, they have no aspirations for that.
Right.
They actually have some kind of a committee or an organization, I don't know how often they meet, but they are like a think tank or something to speculate what type of wars will we have 50 years from now? What do we have to do? So this is an institution which never foresees ever having peace, never is going to be working for peace.
Right.
And so it's
True.
inimical to the human race. That's the bottom line here.
In that brilliant warrior that I referred to earlier, they will have all kinds of platforms, including a mothership type thing for cyber wars in cyberspace. That's an electronic warfare. Will be, that's a whole other topic. But you're right. There is no potential peace in sight, and this military-industrial complex is making no effort, nor will they, because there's big money in this.
In a decent society with a decent government, we would be talking about how are we going to make sure that 50 years from now there will never be war.
Right.
That our children, our grandchildren will never experience war, and that it'll be a thing of our barbaric, uncivilized past. But that these people contemplate and plan for and pay brilliant people to develop more and more destructive technology, it shows how perverse it is.
Would
They
you
don't even
repeat,
conceive of it.
Larry, what you said about Venezuela, that they haven't aggressed on any other nation in more than, 2 centuries?
In 200 years, they've never attacked another nation.
Venezuela can do that, why can't we?
But another thing is that, I don't know the period of time, but the nation we always threaten to attack, Iran, has a very pacific history, you know. They do not have a history of attacking anyone.
Right.
It's the United States of America, it's NATO allies in Israel who are the promoters of international warfare. Basically, nobody else on earth wants it.
Right.
Because these are the people who are part of an association of nations which lives by exploiting the rest of the world. I mean, we've always lived off the wealth coming from Africa, coming from South America, coming from Asia. You know, it's time that the United States of America live as one equal nation among many, respecting international law, and international law is very clear. Warfare is illegal. Unless you're under attack, warfare is illegal.
That's right.
You know, and if the U.S. wasn't promoting war, we could probably establish world peace. Nobody else wants to pay for it. Nobody else wants to go through this. I mean, there's conflicts within national borders, such and so forth. But as far as governments wishing to pursue international warfare, it's not the Russians that want to do it. I mean, my God, we instigated revolt against a democratically elected government in Ukraine, overthrew a democratically elected government as NATO encroaches towards the borders of Russia, and then blamed it on Putin. I mean, outside the United States and Western Europe, Putin is not seen as an aggressive character at all. He's seen as a responsible international leader who has great respect, and by the way, has the highest approval rate of his public of any leader on earth.
Well,
And following him are Rafael Correa of Ecuador, the socialist president of Ecuador, Evo Morales, the socialist president of Bolivia, and as I just told you in the last show we did, President Ortega of Nicaragua has like 77% approval rating. So, and it's not China. It's not China that's seeking to weaponize. They do, in response to the U.S., deciding to, you know, send more of its military into the Pacific to try to dominate the Pacific and create conflicts there. The U.S. during the George W. Bush administration, you know, set up a new fleet to patrol Latin America. You know, it's the United States that pushes war, spends the money on war, is always pushing the technology of death and destruction. And as I said before, we either stop it or it stops us,
Yeah.
or our children or our grandchildren. I mean, we've got other, not only is it horribly destructive, we have other things we need to do.
that's absolutely right. Well, just to let people know that I'm in this document, it also talks about an IED petting zoo. I have no idea what that is. If they're just using that as some kind of cynical sarcasm, you know, imagine equating a petting zoo to an IED, an improvised explosive device, which has killed or maimed numbers of our soldiers, and they're making a joking reference to this in this
You
document.
better find out what it's about and then get back to us. with
Right.
the
Yeah, that would be
information, 'cause
interesting
that's
to
pretty
know.
mysterious.
Right, it is interesting. And then there's talk in here, there's listed on here, it shows a picture of it. There's a gas chamber at Camp Ripley. There's a demolition site. There's a seal cabin. There's talk about white phosphorus being used there. There's a prisoner of war camp. There may be 2 internment camps out there. Some of the documents have referred to that. I'm not sure because I haven't researched it enough, but rather disturbing information.
It is, and when you consider the source that it's coming from, Camp Ripley, then you know it's not us just making stuff up.
Well, I've had
Not that we do
National
that.
Guard veterans tell me about, you know, that the concentration camp, jail, whatever they have there is, could be converted quite easily to a real holding facility for human beings. So,
For civilians.
For
or
whomever.
for
For
you know,
prisoners of war.
immigrants, who knows?
Mhm.
I don't know.
The next Japanese population, wherever they may.
Recently, Cornel West has, and I respect him a lot, has come under fire because he stood up to, the title of this is, he stood up to the bullies, the Israel bullies and United States bullies. This is dated 24th of 2015, and it's titled Truth Teller Cornel West Stands Up to Israel Lobby Bullies. Cornel West has hit back at criticism from anti-Palestinian organizations and Obama supporters who have tried to smear and silence him. The escalating deaths and sufferings in Black and poor America and the marvelous new militancy in our Ferguson moment should compel us to focus on what really matters. West, a celebrated public intellectual and professor emeritus of African American Studies at Princeton University, wrote in a message on his Facebook page, "The life and death issues of police murders, poverty, mass incarceration, drones, TPP, that's the Trans-Pacific Partnership, unjust trade policies, vast surveillance, decrepit schools, unemployment, Wall Street power, Israeli occupation of Palestinians, delete resistance in India, and ecological catastrophe. It is notable that West, unlike the overwhelming majority of public figures in the United States, has been forthright in criticizing Obama's support for Israel's massacre in Gaza and recently urged Princeton University to divest from companies complicit in Israeli human rights crimes. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, not because he's Jewish, but because he has chosen to promote occupation and human annihilation, West said at a mass rally during the Israel attack on Gaza in Washington, D.C. last August. Barack Obama is a war criminal. I believe that as well. Not because he's Black or half African American and white, but because his drones have killed 233 innocent children and because he facilitates the killing of innocent Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, West added. It is precisely because of his support for the Palestinian struggle that West has become a target of Israel lobby groups.
And Obama's a war criminal because he pursued a war against Libya, destroyed a perfectly functional country that had free universal medical care, the highest standard of living in Africa, free education through graduate level university, high standard of nutrition and good housing, and destroyed that country, totally unprovoked. I mean, the man's definitely a war criminal.
Right. Now, along the lines of drones, it's really important that we talk about this because Ramstein, the air base in Germany, has really taken heat from over
What's
there.
that now?
And they should be. Ramstein.
Ramstein. I used to live there.
Interesting.
Wow.
I didn't know
When I
that.
was a kid, I lived on Ramstein Air Force Base.
This is an article titled Drone Victims Take Germany to Court for Abetting United States Murders. And it's by David Swanson. David Swanson is who wrote the article about me and this intolerant war town, that my signs were not welcome in a war town. Andreas Schröder is an attorney on the staff of the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights. He's the lead attorney on a suit being brought by ECCHR, and Reprieve against the German government on behalf of 3 Yemeni survivors of a United States drone strike. The case will be heard in Cologne on May 27th. Their suit argues that it is illegal under German law for the German government to allow the United States Air Base at Ramstein to be used for drone murders abroad. The suit comes after the passage of a resolution in the European Parliament in February of 2014 urging European nations to oppose and ban the practice of extrajudicial targeted killings, and to ensure that member states, in conformity with their legal obligations, do not perpetrate unlawful targeted killings or facilitate such killings by other states. The suit is based on constitutional rights in Germany and thus not seeking prosecution, but measures the German administration to stop the use of German territory for illegal actions by the U.S. in Yemen. The central claim, he said, is that the U.S. air base at Ramstein is involved in drone operations by transmitting data from and to drones through a satellite relay station, as well as transatlantic fiber cables. The suit seeks to stop the use of the airbase's Air Operations Center for analysis of surveillance images sent by drones as part of combat drone missions. It's important to prove that the United States practice in conducting drone strikes is illegal in several aspects. On the one hand, strikes in Yemen are conducted outside an armed conflict and thus infringe the right to life without any justification. In line with a legal opinion by German Federal Prosecutor's Office, we don't consider the U.S. to be in a global armed conflict against Al-Qaeda and associated forces. Even if there would be the case of an armed conflict, the targeting practice by the United States is too broad and includes a large number of targets that do not fall under the category of legitimate military targets in an armed conflict. Attacks against those targets are thus illegal, even in armed conflict. Politically, the European Parliament has made a strong statement against the illegal and expanded use of drone strikes. All EU member states are also bound by laws such as the European Convention of Human Rights to respect and protect the right to life. A similar provision is part of the German Constitution. On August 29, 2012, 5 rockets fired by United States drones struck the village of Kashmir in eastern Yemen. The extended family of our clients had gathered in the village to celebrate a wedding. 2 members of the family were killed in the strike. Other family members were left with ongoing trauma. What could result if you succeed? They asked of this prosecutor. The result could be that the German government must take a stronger position toward the United States government to stop the use of the United States Air Base in Ramstein for drone operations, including activities to rebuild the relay station or the Air Operations Center. The ultimate goal is to change the United States practice of drone strikes and to conduct them according to human rights standards. People must continue to put pressure on governments worldwide to take a clear position on the legal boundaries of drone strikes, as well as the long-term consequences in international relations if such illegal practice continues in many different places worldwide.
Well, we're all sort of dumbstruck. Apparently.
There's a lot more information in this document, and it connects Creech Air Force Base with the Ramstein Air Force Base. And I don't know that we're going to have time to read it. Maybe I can cherry pick the information in here, but the United States considered, instead of using Ramstein, positioning a big ship out in the ocean, but it wouldn't have the same effect. It would have like a lag time. For some reason, because I suppose the data hookups aren't as strong or whatever. But, well, I'll just begin. No, I'll let Teresa start reading.
Well, I'm curious, why would it be okay to put it in the ocean but not in Germany?
Maybe because it's international waters, I don't know.
I know, I'm just thinking of it as a moral issue.
There's some German citizens are bringing suit because illegal activities are going on in Ramstein, so.
And everybody's trying to wash their hands of this because they know the United States is implicit in war crimes. And what's going to happen when they can prove that what the United States is doing, whether it's, see, they're just skirting the law in every way they can. What's going to happen is the guys and the gals that are sitting in these little trailers out at Creech Air Force Base and other bases throughout the United States are going to take the hit for this. They're going to be prosecuted and put in federal prison for war crimes. And the big monkey mucks are going to get off. That's the history of our nation.
That's always the plan.
But anyway, go ahead and read some.
It says here, the pilots at Creech and other ground control stations send their commands to the drones they operate via transatlantic fiber optic cables to Germany, where the Ramstein uplink bounces the signal to a satellite that connects to drones over Yemen, Somalia, and other target countries. So that's how that works. It's not that they're starting in Germany. Germany's just a way station. But who wants to be that? Ramstein is ideally situated as a satellite relay station to minimize the lag time between the commands of the pilots and their reception by the aircraft, called latency. Too much latency, which would be caused by additional satellite relays, would make swift maneuvers impossible. Video images from a drone could not be delivered to the U.S. in near real time. And without the speed and precise control an installation like Ramstein allows, pilots would practically be flying blind. What a pity. So, very, very interesting. You know, if we can't be murdering terrorists without the help of other countries, then maybe we need to get out of the business. Wouldn't that be nice? When the prominent German daily newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung and the German public television broadcaster ARD published an expose on Ramstein in May 2013 and alleged that the base was being used to facilitate drone strikes, it created a massive controversy in Germany. The report spurred parliamentary investigations and calls for the U.S. to explain exactly what it was doing at the base. In response, the German and U.S. governments mischaracterized the reporting, and the German government claimed it had no evidence of Ramstein's role in lethal strikes. So, just another can of worms everywhere we go. Really worms behind. A month later, in a June 2013 speech in Berlin, President Obama addressed the issue of Ramstein's role in the drone war. He did not mention that the satellite relay facility at Ramstein enables U.S. drone strikes. Instead, he denied a claim that the journalists had not made.
Yeah.
We do not use Germany, he said. We do not use Germany as a launching point for unmanned drones as part of our counterterrorism activities, Obama said.
See, they haven't brought that up.
Technically, they're launched at Creech or something.
Yeah.
Right, he's using a diversionary tactic similar to what the Little Falls City Council does to do with the golf board thing. Okay, I'll give you an example. This is done at all levels of government. At the last council meeting, instead of focusing on the illegality of the Golf Advisory Board not meeting for 27 years monthly, as is mandated by the ordinance, a law that the council developed, what does Dan Vogt do? He focuses on the profitability of the golf course. Obama's doing the same thing here. He's saying, he's trying to take the focus off the fact that the United States is actually killing people via this bouncing satellite deal. Oh, we don't position these big drones at that base. We don't fly them out of there. It was a diversionary tactic.
They don't even send a command to strike there. So it's just a bounce. So yeah, he's just diverted from the issue, didn't address the issue that the legal challenge is being based on. So just double talk.
There's a whole lot more to get into next time about the drones. We'll have to film another 2 sections on that. But I want to finish with letting people know there was a big event just happened recently now over the weekend called Peace or Wars Without End, and it was held down at Texas Southern University, and it involved a whole bunch of really good speakers that included Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, former Colonel Ann Wright, who goes to a lot of different protests and so on. She's in the know. She worked for the military for a long time. And the whole event was dedicated to Chalmers Johnson, the patriot who warned of blowback from the United States global hegemony. And the conference is dedicated to him. He's a distinguished anti-imperialist scholar, public intellectual, and professor emeritus of the University of California in San Diego before his death in 2010. He spent the final 15 or so years of his life documenting the growth of American militarism and the erosion of the checks and balances aspect of the American Republic. Under current conditions, political power has shifted increasingly into the president's hand and eroded constitutional liberties. Now the United States heads an imperial project using its 700 bases to control political and economic developments everywhere. This development threatens the United States with bankruptcy and spurs the hatred we see directed at the United States from so many corners of the globe. Professor Johnson is the man who introduced the CIA expression blowback to the American public. He became acquainted with the term while working with the Director of Central Intelligence, Alan Dulles, as a consultant to the CIA. It refers to retaliatory acts against the United States for illegal behavior by United States agents in foreign countries kept hidden from Americans. The attack on the USS Cole in 2000 and the 2 attacks on the World Trade Towers are 3 high-profile examples. Johnson was shocked to see the United States military expanding after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. At that point, he began to study United States militarism and developed a theory that the United States government had acquired an empire of bases over 730 countries to serve the military-industrial complex, to control the global economy, and to create a worldwide hegemon to police the world.
And on that note, depressing as it is, we're going to have to call it quits. We've gone over our time as usual. And, but we've been so happy to be here, and we're so thankful to have Larry with us. He's just got such insight into international situations.
And thank you very much for watching, and join us for more updates on Camp Ripley in the future.
Can we talk? We'll be seeing you.